when AI first started appearing, there were so many lawyers that threw their hands saying, AI is never going to take the place of an attorney. I mean, they're not going to take our jobs. Well, you know what? The smart guys are learning how to leverage those tools, and they are going to take your job.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Digital Domination for Lawyers podcast. My name is Andy Mizrahi. I'm so happy and excited to be here with Neil Tyra. Neil, can you introduce yourself?
Well, certainly. Thank you, Andy, for that brief introduction. My name is Neil Tyra. I'm an estate planning attorney in Rockville, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. As you can see, I'm a very young attorney. No, that's not true. I'm a very old attorney, but I haven't always been an attorney. The law was my fourth career. I'm now working on my fifth as well. The bottom line is I've never quite figured out what I want to be when I grow up. So, but along those lines,
I want to say something to set you up better, because I like the way we started our first conversation was like, this podcast is about young lawyers that are tech savvy and understand. You're like, no, let's pause on the young thing, but yes, tech savvy and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I think that has allowed me to do what I've done is that I've always been a techie. And that in part comes from, my previous careers. So we've done a lot of speaking.
So you're in real estate law, like estate planning. So tell us your journey to get here. What was your techie digital life?
Yeah, so I do a lot of public speaking. I spoke in bar associations and corporate events and things like that. People always want to know, well, why should I pay attention to you? What do you have to offer? And I say, listen, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I've been around the block a few times and see if I can work in a few more metaphors here. But I started, like I said, law is my fourth career. So I started off cooking for a living, and that made my mother very happy because she knew that I would never starve to death. So I cooked all over Annapolis when I was young. And, that was something that I really enjoyed doing. Worked in some very fine restaurants, well-known named restaurants in Annapolis. But then, going away to college and all that. And I had a little bit too much fun. And so I decided to get a real job. And I started working in the space program at Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. So Goddard Space Flight Center is to the unmanned space program what the Johnson Space Flight Center is to the manned program. So I worked in the unmanned space program. And I got hired as a teletype operator. So your listeners may not even know what a teletype was, but it was a communications device where you sent text messages around the world using dedicated teletype systems. And I reported for work and failed my typing test immediately and talked to the supervisor and said, this is really not something for me. And he said, okay, well, I got this other job for you. And I got to work in the control center, which is kind of, if you imagine the control center at Johnson Space Flight Center, think of that on a slightly smaller scale. For the unmanned space program. And then one thing led to another, and I spent 20 years doing that.
It's amazing how something we take for granted now, like sending messages, was your full-time job at NASA?
Yeah, for NASA. Yeah.
What years was that?
So this is 1974 to 94.
It was a specialized computer software.
Well, it was a device. A teletype machine looked like a big typewriter. It just sent these text messages around the world to the tracking stations and in various places. But I ended up being a launch director, which was very cool.
What is a launch director?
So a launch director works in the control center, and for every unmanned satellite or space mission, when the rocket, the booster, is launched, from that point until the satellite is placed into orbit, it's called orbital insertion, the launch director is in control of all the downrange assets, all the tracking sites around the world. So that was my job. And we'd probably put up, I think, a launch every month or so while I was a director, which is interesting because I had just earned the right to vote. And yet I was controlling millions of dollars worth of assets in the space program. I tell people it was a job I would have done for free.
Wow.
It was that cool. And so that ended up leading me into software development. And I ended up working on the original shuttle missions, STS 1, 2, and 3. I worked on, prior to that, the Apollo-Soyuz test mission, which was the precursor to Space Lab. And the first time Soviet astronauts and American astronauts rendezvoused in space, Apollo-Soyuz. And like I said, it was a job I would have done for free. That led to me getting involved in air defense systems, and I helped build the Icelandic air defense system when I was at Computer Science Corporation. But all during that time, now I've been in the tech world for 20 some odd years. But all that time, it always harbored a secret desire to be an attorney. And in part, I think that was because there were some very famous TV shows going all the way back to the original Perry Mason. But back in those days, a really popular legal show was L.A. Law. And everybody wanted to be a lawyer after they saw L.A. Law. So I always kind of had that secret idea about being an attorney. And I had a couple of friends who went to law school late in life who were in different, business. One was a symphonic conductor. And I thought, well, gee, if they could go to law school late in life, maybe that's not out of the question. So I started doing the calculations. I had 2 children that were quickly growing up. And I figured if I did not get in front of them on the money train, there was going to be nothing left. So let me just see if I can. I had no idea what it took to get into law school. So let me just see if I can get into law school. And then we'll figure it out. And so I was lucky enough to get accepted at the Catholic University of America Law School, the Columbus School of Law in downtown Washington, D.C. And now I had a decision to make. Now, what I left out of all that was my third career. So first career cooking, second career was in the space program. Third career, when I left Computer Science Corporation, I'd always been a practicing martial artist. And so I opened up my own martial arts studio. So I ran the martial arts studio, taught hundreds, if not thousands, of children and adults the art of Goju-Ryu karate, a Japanese traditional form of karate. But that took its toll on my body. I was wearing down. And that's when I decided, well, let me see if I can get in law school. So I sold the karate school in order to pay to go to law school. So I went to law school full time. I treated it like a job. I was the oldest student in my class. I started at 48, and I went to law school from 8 to 5 every day, whether I had class at 8 o'clock or not. That's when I got to school, and I left at 5, and I did a couple hours of reading at night.
What? Wait a second. You had a dojo, martial arts studio.
Yeah.
You sold it.
Yeah.
And you were in law school full time. That allowed you to cover your life's expenses and
It was a pretty successful karate studio. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How old were your kids at the time?
Let's see. My daughter was going into high school, and my son was in middle school.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so I went full time, and I treated it like a job, and because it was a job. And then when I graduated, I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to take the bar. And I said, I'm only going to take it one time.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't pass, I would go figure something else out. I wasn't going to be one of these guys. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but just where I was in life, I wasn't going to chase, the bar if I didn't pass it on my first attempt.
Wow.
So I over prepared for that too. I'm just going back to a quick story. When I went to see about what it would take to get admitted to law school, I did all the practice tests for the LSAT. I took the LSAT practice exam 11 times. Okay. My score never deviated plus or minus 5%. If you took those 11 results and you averaged them, that was the exact score I got on the actual LSAT. So I over prepared for that. And when it came time for the bar exam, I over prepared for that. I took 3 different bar prep courses because I said I was only going to do it once.
Wow. How many lawyers pass it on the first time? Is it like right? It's not a thing, right?
I don't think it's most of them. I think it's probably less than half. In fact, I don't really know the answer to that, but I did. I remember that day I was checking, online, and there it was. Finally, I had passed, and so we had a pretty celebratory evening that night. So
Wow.
now I had to figure out, okay, now you're past the exam. Now you're an attorney. Now what?
Right. Right. Because that's a big part of being a lawyer is like, okay, now you're a business owner. Like, what?
Or yeah, I didn't know what. So what I found out that there wasn't much call for a 51-year-old associate, right? Is it age discrimination? I don't know that it's age discrimination as much as it was a business decision. Because, the big firms that were here in Washington, D.C., they're paying 180, 200,000 for a first year associate. They're making a business decision and they're looking at a guy who's 51 years old and thinking, well, how long is he going to be with us? As opposed to somebody who's 25, or 27. So I found it pretty difficult to get a job. All through law school, I had worked in the state's attorney's office. I was lucky enough to have friends who were former state's attorney, and in fact, were both members of the bench, helped me get into law school or wrote my recommendations. And they got me my student teaching and internships at the state's attorney's office. So that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to put bad guys in jail.
So wait, so how did you get your first job as a 50-year-old lawyer?
So I was going to say I had a crisis of confidence that I wasn't quite ready to be a state's attorney, even though they offered me the job. I said, well, let me just peek and see if there's anything else out there. And that's when I found out that there was not much call, except there was one firm in downtown Washington, D.C., a small boutique personal injury firm that my resume intrigued them. I think, well, here's a mature guy. We're not going to get somebody in their first job. This is a guy who knows how to
NASA.
Worked at NASA.
Make a good meal.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't go well, it could whoop your...
Yeah. So they took a chance on me and Tom Simeone and Craig Miller from Simeone and Miller. And that's what I did. I started off doing personal injury litigation, plaintiff side litigation. They liked the idea that I had been in court during the time I was at the state's attorney's office. So I started there and I worked there for, I think, 3 years. And at that point, then my son was about to go into high school. And my son was a big time athlete, wrestler and a soccer player. And I knew he had a chance to be on the varsity team all 4 years, which is in fact what happened at a pretty prestigious private school. Right. And I didn't want to have to ask for time off. It wasn't fair to Simeone and Miller. And so I'd already owned my own business. I figured I knew, I'd already made enough mistakes when I opened my first business, but I sold it at a pretty handsome profit. So I thought, well, how difficult could opening a law practice be? So I went to Tom and Craig and say, hey, listen, I'm moving on. I'm going to start my own practice. No hard feelings, and there weren't any. And so I opened the doors for the Tyra law firm in Rockville, Maryland.
Wow.
And
what year was that?
That would have been 2007, 2008, in that time frame. And so, but I didn't have any clients, figured, I'll figure it out. I don't know how I'm going to get them. I'll figure it out. Anyway, I get into my new office and I had, a vision of what I wanted for the office. In retrospect, that was a huge waste of money. That didn't amount to anything, but that was my vision.
Of what the office looked like or what the company looked like? Yeah,
so I had a vision of what I thought a law office should look like. I wanted it to be in a multi-story building. I wanted people to have to ride the elevator up. I wanted a corner office. I got all those things.
Interesting.
I wanted a wet bar in my office. Figured at this point, I'm 51 years old. I own my own law firm. I need a wet bar in my office.
Was this more like Perry Mason or LA Law?
It was more like LA Law, right? And, I envisioned having the judges over to play poker late at night, that kind of thing. And like I said, I thought I'd made all the mistakes. Little did I know that there's a whole new set of mistakes when you open a law firm as opposed to opening a karate school.
Yeah.
So I struggled for a while. No, it's not gonna lie. I struggled for a while. I was lucky enough to pick up some cases right away. A litigation partner of ours called me the day I turned the phones on and said, "Hey, I'm and Craig aren't going to litigate my cases anymore. Are you interested?" I said, "Absolutely." I just opened the doors. So I quickly picked up 18 cases to litigate or settle. So they got me rolling. And then I didn't have enough misery in my life, so I decided to add family law because I figured people never get tired of wrecking their cars or ruining their marriages or lives. So I was a personal injury and a family law litigator, and I did that. And, eventually built the practice up to where it was sustainable and started to grow. But now at that point, my kids had now gone away to school, or, well, my daughter had graduated from college and my son was away to college. So we have a place down at the beach. So I wanted to be a little more mobile. I wanted to be less tied to the courthouse. And so that's when I decided I thought I was going to do elder law. Okay. So the idea was, I figured my peers, my people
Right. We'll talk.
are perfect candidates for elder law. And what I found out that elder law came in two flavors: emergency or pre-planning. And I didn't have the resources to do emergency work. Grandma just fell and broke her hip, and we've got 30 days to get her qualified for Medicaid. So I gravitated towards the pre-planning, and that's really just estate planning. So I kind of, again, shifted again and started focusing on estate planning exclusively. And that's what I do now. Now, what was interesting about that is that this was all pre-COVID by a long ways, but I had always been techie owing to my background working at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always wanted to be able to work wherever I could plug my laptop in.
Right.
Now, for people today, that's a trivial statement because we're all aware of the cloud and we're all aware of these resources that we have on the internet. But 15 years ago, we didn't have any of that.
Right.
Okay. So how do you, can you become a digital nomad in the legal space then? And particularly, I'm a Mac guy, all Apple all the time from the very first Mac, 128 Mac. I'm the OG of Mac Apple users in the legal community, at least here in this area. And so I was able to, with my tech background, work a configuration that allowed me to take my work home. And on my laptop, when I came back, it would sync up with my desktop, and that's how I maintain my files and what have you.
Very
so
cool. Like at an era when people weren't doing that and weren't
no,
I think
it was
which wasn't, like you said, wasn't as popular, wasn't as widely used. Or
no.
It's funny how you have to be more techie now to use a Windows or some
So I was an early adopter of technology, and I recognized that because I was light years ahead of most solo practitioners, that it gave me the leverage to be able to outperform firms with multiple staff members. So I was able to work more efficiently. I was able to work more efficiently.
Interesting.
And more profitably because of my use of technology. And that, as a result of that, I started getting, a lot of inquiries. How do you do this? How are you being able to work from every place and any place? How are you able to maintain your your client data privacy. Lawyers were asking me this. Lawyers wanted to know, wait a second.
Your secret.
What's your secret? You don't have a fax machine? No. I said, I had a fax machine when I worked for NASA 20 years ago. That's 20-year-old technology. I'm not using a fax machine. I was one of the first ones to have a website. Then I became kind of a sought-after speaker on the use of technology in small firms. And I spoke a bunch of different places, ABA Tech Show in Chicago and Maryland Bar Association, DC Bar Association, all those kinds of things. So then I got exposed to some entrepreneurs and people who were starting to exploit the digital marketplace, starting to be able to leverage social media. And I wasn't real happy with some of the coaching that I was getting along those lines. So at that point, I was a podcast junkie. I listened to probably 15 hours podcasts a week, something along those lines.
Was this the beginning of podcasting?
Yeah, this is the beginning of podcasting. So pre-COVID by about 5 years. So it's funny how we measure everything pre-COVID, post-COVID. Right? And so I said, well, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. And that's about all the thought I gave it. Yeah, I think I'm going to start a podcast. And I figured originally what I thought I was going to do was interview really smart attorneys in this local area, kind of war stories and what it was like to practice back in the day. I pretty quickly realized that had a limited appeal. And so I said, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just interview smart people and hope some of it rubs off. And in those days, the average length of a podcast was about 3 months. I said, if I could interview people for 3 months.
What do you mean? Like podcast start to finish?
Start to finish, they would peter out, And, that's like, 12 episodes if you're doing it weekly. I thought maybe I'd do it daily. So that way I'd get 90 episodes in. And I figured
it was to make yourself smarter in the law space.
Yeah, for me, it was a way to get free advice. And I don't shy away from that. I had 3 types of guests, right? Successful solo or small firm practitioners. So we would do a lessons learned, what I did right, what I did wrong, what I wish I could have done differently. The second type were entrepreneurs, people who had a mindset or a business viewpoint that I think lawyers would be well advised to pay attention to. They themselves weren't necessarily attorneys. And then the third category was what I called gadget folks, people who had a product or a service that solo or small firm practitioners might find useful. So I started The Law Entrepreneur. That was the name of the podcast. And we ran for 8 years, right? 400 episodes. Here I thought I was going to do it 3 months. I ended up doing it 8 years every week. And it was phenomenal. It took off like nobody's business. I was shocked at how popular it became. I was voted in the top 10 legal podcasts many years running by lawyerist.com.
Wow.
And after 400 episodes, I just woke up one day and said, you know what? I'm done. I did 400. I never thought I'd do 40. I did 400 and it was great. I loved pretty much the whole thing, the whole experience. I learned a hell of a lot. And so I just signed off out of the blue. Said, this is my last podcast. It's been great. 8 years. Thanks, everybody. And then I learned that there were people that would say, whoa, 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 whoa. Where are you going? What are you doing? You can't just walk away from this. I went, sure I can. And I said, no, you've got 400 hours of programming here of content, legal content that's relevant. We'd like to buy it. And I said, you're kidding me. And nope. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up selling the podcast to my good friend, Sam Malai, who operates My Legal Academy. Some people may know him from his previous iteration of Legal Funnels. He was one of the first guys to capitalize on the funnel architecture for digital marketing. So Law Entrepreneur is now owned by My Legal Academy. And I thought, well, that's great. I loved it. Thanks a lot. And then I go, whoa, again, not so quick. Not so quick. We'd really like for you to co-host with us. And I said, oh, well, how long? As long as you want. So I've been co-hosting the show. Not every episode, but most of them. And so now the Law Entrepreneur, I think, is at episode 420. It's still going. Sam and his team run it now, and I'm just a talking head.
That's amazing. Well, here's my question. I'm going to pause it.
Yeah.
You have an amazing story. You were a chef. You worked in NASA for 20 years. You were a software engineer. Ran a martial arts studio. You sold that martial arts studio in order so you can go to law school at 48. You found a job at 50?
51.
51 to be a lawyer at a small boutique. You opened up your own firm in around 2007. One of the first ones with a website. One of your biggest successes, you were able to work from home because you were techie, and that allowed things to be more efficient and more profitable. You were one of the first ones with a website. And because you were so techy, you became a sought-after speaker. You were one of the first podcast people. You had such a successful one that you were even able to sell it. Yeah. It's an amazing story. And first of all, amazing.
When you put it all together like that, it's no wonder I feel so old.
You don't seem old at all.
I just celebrated my 60th birthday, just to put it in context.
Amazing. So, I'm just going to ask a couple of quick tips for lawyers trying to get themselves out there. You've done it. You've had the podcast. You have the website. You are the techie guy. You worked at NASA. What are some takeaways that lawyers can do to get themselves out there?
Well, I think you have to embrace technology. It's no longer a case where it's a nice to have. I think if you're not fully conversant in technology, or you hire someone to manage your technology for you, you're going to get left behind, because the smart guys are evolving exponentially. Perfect example is the role of AI. What does it play in a law office? And lawyers are so typical, because, when people started having websites, the original lawyers, the old school, was like, I don't need a website. I do good legal work, and word of mouth, people come to me. Well, that worked for Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't work today. I mean, you'll get a few cases by referrals, but you've got to be able to market yourself. So you have to embrace technology, because you have to work efficiently. You have to work quickly. You have to work collaboratively. You need to be able to work remotely with other people. So if you're not willing to do that, you got to go work in a firm somewhere. If you want to own your own practice and have the flexibility to design your life the way you want to, you have to embrace technology.
Love that.
The second thing is, my practice didn't really get profitable until I bit the bullet and hired a virtual assistant. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think, again, attorneys say, well, I'm going to wait till I get enough business, that I have so much business that I can then go hire somebody. It's the wrong way to.
And another thing is, they probably only want in-person work.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to be able to see them, because that's how they came up through the system. That's not how the world works. Although, I don't know, current administration is trying to make us go back to those days, but the world really works. People really want flexibility in terms of where they can work. Doesn't mean you can't require them to be in an office, or, in your visual space, but you have to give them flexibility. And the idea that I'm going to wait until I have enough work to afford to hire somebody is going to keep you from scaling up. You have to bite the bullet. And I worked with a company called Get Staffed Up. I highly endorse them. No affiliates or anything, but they're out of Florida. Get Staffed Up. They have offshore virtual assistants. And the difference with them and other virtual assistant agencies is, you hire your virtual assistant for 40 hours a week. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, you hire them for a price less than what you would pay a domestic VA, but so you get a little more bang for your buck. but you have a contract for 1 year. You're going to pay 40 hours a week. You'd be surprised at how much you find they can do when you have to fill up their 40 hours, right? You have that commitment. So you're going to find work for them. So what does that do for you? It reduces your workload. Yes, you have to train them. Yes, you have to onboard them. Yes, you have to monitor them. It doesn't come without, some work. But if you put the work into it, pretty soon you only have to work 20 hours a week while they're working 40, or you work 10 hours a week while they're working 40. And what do you do with the rest of that time? You go get more business. Okay. So that's how I scaled, is when I committed to having a VA work 40 hours that made things work. And then the last part is, I think
Wait, I want to pause 1 second. I want to comment on what you just said, because I really love it. VA work. I love it because when you read a book like The 4-Hour Work Week.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss.
It seems very mystical, and it's like, whoa, like you don't believe that it's possible, but you just simply broke down how you can really reduce your time by actually using it. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you some concrete examples. Okay. I used to answer my own phone. Tyra Law Firm. Okay. Tyra Law Firm. I remember doing something, phone would ring. Yay, the phone's ringing. Tyra Law Firm. Right. Pretty soon, I'm like, damn, the phone's ringing. Okay. I hired a virtual receptionist. I'm still with the same virtual receptionist. Ruby used to be called Ruby Receptionist, and now just called Ruby. Okay. I've been with Ruby for 20 years. Okay. Or ever since they started.
Yeah.
I used to do my own bookkeeping, my own accounting. Well, I'm not an accountant. I know enough about QuickBooks to be dangerous. So I hired a remote bookkeeper. Then I hired a remote fractional CFO to help give me the 40,000 of the financial well-being of my firm. But all the time I was continually looking at how can I market my practice efficiently? Okay. I don't want to have to go to a lot of networking events. I don't have time for all that. I work with referral-based systems, but I really want to leverage, and of course, I'm a techie. I want to leverage social media. And so I was advertising, and my scope of my practice was statewide because I could do it remotely. People in farthest regions of the state, I could still service them because I've set this up. It still wasn't working for me. And so I had a friend of mine who owned a pool company, and he told me, your footprint's way too big. In your little town that you live in, there's more than enough people to keep you busy the rest of your life. I went,
interesting.
Really? Sure. You need to make yourself the best estate planning attorney in Darnestown, Maryland. Okay. Population 50,000. And so when I started micro niching my marketing down to my smallest geographic area.
Wait, I'm going to ask you this question again in an interview question, so you can set this all up in a nice way. What is your third best piece of advice in order? So instead of casting a wide net, what do we do?
Micro niche down to the small geographical area. Yeah. Yeah. Because first off, it's cheaper. Okay. You're not broadcasting statewide. You're just in your city. You become well known in your city. Then, parents, grandparents, neighbors, they all know you do estate planning. And so that factor, my micro niche down to a small geographic area, VAs and technology. And I think that's the future. Or that's what you have to do. I think that's actually, frankly, the minimum now. I think that's if you're a solo or a small firm practitioner, you don't have all three of those legs in the stool firmly established, that's going to tip over and you're going to be on your ass, right? And what's quickly emerging is AI, obviously.
Yeah.
If you're not, and again, the lawyers are so unpredictable. When AI first started appearing, there were so many lawyers that threw their hands and say, AI is never going to take the place of an attorney. I mean, They're not going to take our jobs. Well, you know what? The smart guys are learning how to leverage those tools, and they are going to take your job.
Yeah.
They are going to take your job. It's not going to be, Siri's not going to be one writing your brief, but somebody with a complete knowledge of all the tools. And there are 100. People think, well, there's Chat GPT and I don't know what, Gemini for Google or Apple Intelligence. Those are three. But if you look, again, plug for Sam, this is a shameless plug, My Legal Academy. You want a list of the 100 top AI tools. He's on the cutting edge. You should go check them out because there's emerging technology in the AI space that's going to blow you away. And if you're not using it, somebody else is, and you're going to get left.
Excellent. Love that. Neil, my last question I love to ask is, before we ask, where can we find you? I'll ask, where can we find out more about you if we want to know more?
Yeah, I'm pretty well everywhere. Neil Tyra, a Tyra Law Firm. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those things. TyraLawFirm.com. I'm just relaunching the new brand of my website literally tomorrow. So you look at it today and it'll be one thing and tomorrow it'll be something different, similar but different. You'll see I've done over 200 videos that are all posted on my website, 200 3-minute videos. So people go to my website and they watch an hour of videos and they think, well, I know this guy. I know exactly who he is. And I know what he can do for me. So that's a big deal too. We didn't get into that. And we didn't even talk about my next career as a musician. So there's my bobblehead up here of me as a guitar playing attorney.
Nice. Love it. If you were to define success personally, professionally, how do you define that? Last question.
Yeah. I think that the people who are truly think of themselves successful are the ones who feel that they've designed their life the way they want to live it, that they didn't fall into it. That is a result of planning and execution. And I think I got lucky in several areas. Okay. I'm not going to deny that, but there's no question in my mind that I consciously chose the work-life balance that I wanted to have and the approach that I wanted to take to business. And that's resulted in my ability to, again, work from the beach, work from the coffee shop, expand my business, make more money now than I've ever made, and work fewer hours than I ever have.
Love it. All right, Neil. This was a great episode. I'm gonna sign us out, and then we're gonna continue talking. I'm just gonna do a quick thing, but all right. This is Neil Tyra. It was so great talking to you. Thank you for being on our show. And this is another episode of Digital Domination for Lawyers podcast.
Thanks for having me, Andy. I really do appreciate it.